brand reputation for a product or service, we've seen that especially younger consumers are becoming more aware of where products are coming from, how products are being made, and so we see that corporate values on social issues are more important than ever.
साउथ एसियामा मानवाधिकारको अवस्था के छ र त्यसलाई हामीले कसरी अगाडि बढाउनुपर्छ भन्ने सन्दर्भमा हो। हाल चाहिँ मानवाधिकारको अवस्था चाहिँ एकदम भनौँ न अलिकति कमजोर भएको अवस्थामा यसलाई हामीले कसरी अगाडि बढाउन सक्छौँ, यसलाई कसरी सफल बनाउन सक्छौँ भन्ने सन्दर्भमा यो साउथ एसिया बिजनेस एन्ड ह्युमन राइट्स भनेर आयोजना गरिएको।
हाँ, मैं झारखंड से हूँ। मीटिंग से उम्मीद तो यही है कि अपने जो साउथ एशिया के जो ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशंस के इशूज़ के बारे में समझ बना सके और BHR का क्या रोल है, वो कैसे और इफ़ेक्टिवली अपने हमारे कंट्री लेवल में इंगेज हो सकती है उसको समझने के लिए, और साथ ही साथ मैं अपने इंडिजिनस के मुद्दों को, खास करके आदिवासियों के मुद्दों को साझा करने के लिए भी आई हूँ। आज मेरा जो सत्र है 4 साढ़े 4 में बहुत बुरी है। हमको लगता है कमोबेश हमारे जितने भी कंट्री हैं सभी में मानवाधिकारों का उल्लंघन बहुत ज़्यादा हो रहा है, और शायद इसीलिए ये BHR का जो भूमिका है, जो रोल है, बहुत ही ज़रूरी है। हमें इसका बेहतर एक्टिवली अगर BHR हमारे इश्यूज़ को उठाएंगे तो हमारे मानवाधिकार के हनन में शायद थोड़ी कमी होगी।
Now, the context of this session is quite interesting if you ask me. I guess it's safe to say that the world and indeed the global economy is in turmoil. We are coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, perhaps in different ways in different countries. We of course have the Ukraine war, which has led to soaring inflation and an energy crisis. We are in the midst of a climate crisis. On the one hand, I mean for workers, the people who produce our clothes, who grow our food, and who make our electronics. As well as for suppliers in South Asia who are part of global supply chains. And I see that Rika has joined us online, so if you could please also give her a round of applause. So first I would like to turn to Pari. Pari has produced some groundbreaking journalism on human trafficking, business and human rights, and has been in the field for quite a long time and has worked at the grassroots level with rights holders. So in this context, since you have engaged with rights holders at the grassroots level, I was wondering if you could share some examples of the underlying causes of exploitation of rights holders and perhaps also workers in South Asia. So I would like to hand the floor over to you now. Thank you.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. I hope you're having a good time. So yes, it's been a long time that I've been covering human trafficking for like past 10 years or now, researching and investigation, doing investigation on trafficking, migration and refugees. Currently I'm focusing on cross-border collaboration. So as you asked, what are the underlying factors that lead to exploitations of South Asians? And there are many factors that lead to trafficking. For example, trafficking for sexual slavery, bride trafficking, organ trafficking, skin trafficking, child labor, child pornography, and many, many things. The continuous religious persecutions and then the targeted, systematic, targeted attack by the Tatmadaw army on the Rohingya Muslims so far actually led to trafficking, a rise in the trafficking of Rohingya Muslims. And that reason actually somewhere some traffickers and agents saw that as a blooming opportunity to exploit the families. So they as a bogus well-wisher, I would say a marriage broker, reach out to the families, who were desperately looking for some help to send across their daughters, their sisters, their mothers, for the safety of their life and to save their honor. And whatever little amount, item they had or land they had to sell off, everything just to pay the traffickers so that they can send off their daughters to across other countries. And that led to rise of bride trafficking, especially in 2017 after the exodus happened. And we saw many women landed in India, in various parts of India as bride trafficking. as bride trafficked as wives, sold into families who could not locally find brides for themselves. Not only women, we also found men who landed in India. Currently, if you ask me the status of all these men, if you think the men are not exploited in the process, no. We have found through our investigation recently, which I'm currently doing with my co-producer Rohit Upadhyay, who's also one of the fellow participants in the program. We have collaborated with a bunch of human rights lawyers and NGOs, and we found during our investigation that at the moment, all the most stateless people who are residing in India are being picked up as forced bonded laborers by the host communities in most of the states of India. And since the stateless people are the cheap laborers, and they could be exploited. And we found that many people in the process, especially some refugees, have faced disabilities. For example, some have lost their limbs, eyesight, and the employers have led them to fend for themselves, because since they do not have any document to prove their identity. For example, in India, you require the Aadhaar to claim any benefits. Aadhaar is a unique identification number that required as a mandatory for every Indian citizenship. And since Rohingyas are stateless people, they do not have leave Aadhaar any other document to prove their identity. As a result, there are many factories out there in Delhi and NCR. We found that the factories are picking up this Rohingyas especially as a bonded laborers. Okay. So this is one of the factors. So like, if you ask what is the reason, the statelessness is the reason here among the, if you talk about the Rohingya refugees. Now in last year, 2020-22, we did a story which is quite related to this year's topic, business and human rights. In that investigation, we focus on all the women from Punjab who have been regularly trafficked to different parts of Europe. In our scenario, in our investigation, we chose Italy because we found not only men, but it was also women who have been largely missing from many Punjabi families, are being regularly trafficked to Italian farms to work in the agriculture sectors. And in the due process, these women were exploited, faced sexual harassment and mental trauma. So yes, again, if you ask what are the factors that led to the trafficking of Punjabi women, see, there are established the network of Punjabis who are in Europe, and that influenced the youth in Punjab, because Punjab is losing its land size, because of the adverse impact of climate change. And also there's there's a concept of where people love to settle abroad. Many other factors, and there's less of employment opportunities.
Workers or rights holders, they're facing intersectional impacts, right? So you mentioned religion, you mentioned gender, you mentioned perhaps also children, you mentioned these rights holders being stateless, which then also leads to them having to be an informal worker probably because they cannot get their Aadhaar, their identity cards. So moving on to the next speaker, Rekha, perhaps you could also reflect a little bit in your answer about this intersectionality and these intersectional impacts. But my question really for you is, again, and digging then a little bit deeper also, building on what Pari has said, is what are the underlying causes of exploitation of workers in South Asia, and what structural barriers do they face in securing improved living and working conditions, and more generally also enjoying their human rights. So please, the floor is yours, Rika.
And yeah, hello everyone. I'm sorry I could not join the panel in person. I'm a bit under the weather, but Kevin, if you can confirm if I'm audible, that will be great.
You are audible. Thank you.
And so I will not focus on, generally very broadly on workers in South Asia. Within Cividec, we of course look at garments, electronics and the leather sectors. When we say exploitation, we are really talking about a social and an economic relationship based on asymmetry in power, where one party unfairly benefits from another. And where exploitative working conditions are concerned, it can be used to describe situations ranging from indecent, harsh or unfair labor conditions to those of modern slavery, human trafficking or forced labor. So global value chains include both. brands as monopolies in the product market and their relations with their suppliers are one of monopsony. And this hypothesis was put forth by Ashok Kumar in his book in 2020.
And I think this is also a great bridge to my next question to Surya, who will be talking a little bit more about global supply chains. And later also to Mustafiz, who might be able to explain to me how these purchasing practices of global brands influence suppliers in South Asia. But so first, let me turn to Surya. Surya, in perhaps 3 minutes, and I'll have a follow-up question for you as well. Could you please shed a light on the main regulatory initiatives around the world that are attempting to put a spotlight on business-related human rights abuses in supply chains? Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kevin, for the question. Because I have 3 minutes, let me say 3 points. I will say civil society advocacy and the investigative journalism by media has been a key driving force for businesses to take human rights seriously. Whether it was the Bhopal gas disaster, or Rana Plaza, or the Karachi cake factory fire, or the Nepalese workers in Qatar or Middle East, journalists have exposed those abuses and put the spotlight on businesses, and including organizations like FIFA, that they have to take their human rights responsibility seriously. And of course, we have seen civil society advocacy throughout the world, whether it is the treaty process that is going on in Geneva, or whether it is mandatory human rights due diligence in Europe. Nothing of this nature would have happened without civil society advocacy. So that is a main lever in my point of view. Second is, if we look around globally, but also in Asia, law and policy changes to promote responsible business conduct are definitely very noticeable. My third point is about power imbalances. These laws are not even looking at the power imbalances between workers and the factories, local supply chains, or the suppliers and the brands, or the power imbalances between South Asia and European Union. I'll stop at this. Thank you.
When we are going for example, with the price negotiation, with our other aspects, then they are just behind of us. They're just pushing us to make it happen, because it seems that it is our own responsibility. Yes, we are not ignoring that it is our responsibility, that whom we appointed to work in our facility, we will pay them, we will give them a good life, but that's our responsibility. But if you see the cost structure, how we quote a price, then what happened? Then we always quote a price based on what we are paying to the workers.
So I think as an independent journalist for the last few years, what is important for us right now is to work in collaboration, and collaboration is the key to a good story, I feel. And when it comes to stories such as this, like a business and human rights violation, we as a journalist who are covering human rights need to spend a good amount of time with the important players and stakeholders. And for example, right now we are also working for a story, the exploitations that largely takes place in the garment industries, and there are many European and US brands that are involved. And to understand all the nuances, we are really spending time with the human rights lawyers that cover, labor laws. But we're also spending time with the union leaders and, unions and all. Because, I don't think we as a journalist should not be in the hurry to break a story. It's important. The best way is to do a good story is by doing it responsibly, and that can only happen if we, spend time with our sources and the actors and try to learn and educate ourselves before putting out any stories. And in the, with the in the new age, media and with the advance of technology, I think there are many interesting ways through which we can actually use the social media to disseminate the information to the consumer especially.
So my question is to Mr. Surya. You mentioned about the 3 Ps, poverty, pollution, and power imbalances. So what we have seen over the years is that a huge dichotomy exists between all these 3s in the informality, and we have seen informality increasing. So the huge supply chain exists between the garment and textile manufacturing chains. It's the South Asian trend. So what would be your suggestion, that since the laws are coming up, the directives are coming up, the national action plans are being set up, how would you see, what would be your suggestions ensure the inclusion of the informality in the global and supply chains, because the UNGP guidelines talk about the third tier, whereas in totality or in reality, we don't see that the suppliers and the brands, they are taking any notice of this informality in the global supply chains of the garment. And I would also like to hear from Mr. Mustafi's experience in Bangladesh, how they have tackled this thing. So this is my point. Thank you.
Because they apply to all business enterprises of all shapes and sizes and doesn't really matter. But when it comes to the formal mandatory due diligence legislation or even the legislation at the domestic level which are already there, they are primarily targeting formal. Now there are many ILO colleagues in the room. The ILO approach is let us formalize the informal. And I think that may happen, that could be part of the solution, but my dialogue with the ILO colleagues has always been that cannot be the solution. It can be part of the solution, because the challenges that we're often talking about are already in the formal sector.
And another question in regard to I think this could be answered by Rika or Mustafiz. There's a lot of outsourcing and contract-based work going on out in Asia, and one of the main reasons behind that is companies do not want to take the burden of employee benefits and social security. In that regard, I would like to hear from both of you, how do we not leave everyone behind, and all those who are outsourcers are also brought into the safety net of social security and employee benefits. Thank you.
It's called participation committee. Every factory has a participation committee for our, for the collective bargain in the factory. It is mandatory by law.
For economic of developing countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, and India, and ethical recruitment should be a major part of this supply chain. However, even the third-party auditing manufacturing companies face problems such as corruption from the very level of vendor application. So my question is to all the panelists, that how should we address this, that because this is a major problem. The corruption starts from the very base level of the HR department in this industry. So my question is to all the panelists for addressing this problem.
Thank you.
Export houses based in south and north part of India, we saw that there were rampant exploitations taking place among the women especially, and these women belongs to marginalized communities, this is nothing new. But we should focus on a positive example that happened recently. For example, last year, H&M signed a binding agreement with Indian, with the worker unions and some of the parties to make sure that such kind of exploitation does not take place ever again in the export houses, especially when it comes to women. So I think this is one good example and can be implemented by the other brands who has their export houses in India. And I think this is one step, and we should focus on that. I think
based on these cases I have, that India still has not ratified. I didn't talk about much more about women, but women's rights are always volatile. So CEDAW has ratified by the government, but it's not implemented properly. So that is also one of the things, and especially the general recommendation.
My question is, how is one act more effective than the other? And how can we maybe bring out more legislative reforms or parliamentary reforms that are effective on the ground? Really. So I can give an example that recently in my state, our assembly, the state assembly had passed a bill. It's Drinking Water Catchment Protection Act, which is 2023. And I'm sure it will bring a lot of positive changes.
About the human rights violations, and in that context, if we have to think about what the reforms is possible, and also constitutional values are not very much respected in that present situation. I think those are to have our what are the rights given under constitutions. I think those rights are also not implemented or violated. So I think we really need to protect those rights first, and to respect those rights, and our duty bearer has to be accountable for that, and we as a civil society organizations and all to have that kind of dialogue with the government to be more accountable, that our duty bearers. And also right holders, they have also right, and their rights should be recognized as legally these are, legally we have to affirm or claim.
In Chittagong Hill Tracts, they are living under the Chittagong Hill Tracts Act, and they are living peacefully. And the people of Chittagong Hill Tracts, that is indigenous peoples, they are not migrating silently in the different parts of our country.
It's a no. Yeah, only few people who are educated, they are migrating. But I think we don't know the situation, ground situation on from plainland and Santal people, Munda people, and many indigenous and even Khasi people. They are migrating silently.
Bengalis also.
Yeah, Bengali people also.
Yes, actually,
Thank you for your questions.
The benefits is not only for the community or only for the Lomjung. This benefits was projected for not only for Nepal, for also the all countries which are connected with the grid to Nepal.
If we are talking about right-based development, then you really need to respect the people's right. You can't see that. The lots of people are getting disappointed. They are losing their land. They are losing their forests. You have environmental law, and then we are not implementing this environmental law. That you really need to implement these laws and everything. People are not against the development. We want development. We indigenous peoples want the development. But why are you importing the development? Why are you denying our participants?
Yeah, Nepal has ratified many policies and also many, like UN-driven even all. But the concern is how the policies and their implementation and how it has been affected.
विकासको नाममा घरहरू भत्काइँदैछ यो विशुद्ध विकास र सडक विस्तार र विकासको नाममा विशुद्ध बिजनेस नै हो नेपाल सरकारले गरिरहेको यो बिजनेस नै हो र यो बिजनेस गरिरहँदा यहाँका रैथाने आदिवासीहरूको मानव अधिकार ह्युमन राइट्सहरू खुसिँदै छ गलत त्यही छ ह्युमन राइट्सलाई हामी नेवारहरूको आदिवासीहरूको र यसो गरिरहँदाखेरि हाम्रो 70 सालमा 39 वटा बाइपासमा घर भत्काइयो र त्यो घर भत्काउँदाखेरि त्यसको पीडामा 6-7 जना हाम्रा साथीहरूले मृत्युवरण गर्नु पुग्यो ती मृत्युवरण गर्दाखेरि त्यसको ह्युमन राइट्स कहाँ गयो तपाईहरुले ती जो स्रोतदाताहरू छन् तिनीहरूलाई त्यो रोका गरिदिनु पर्यो र युएन का ब्रान्च जति छन् ती ब्रान्चहरूले जति यो विकासको नाममा दिइरहेका छन् यो सुविधाहरू सेवा सुविधाहरू तीहरू रोकिदिनु पर्यो हामी यहाँका आदिवासीहरूलाई त सकिने भयो
म गौ पहिचानमा पहिचान भएको व्यक्ति अपाङ्गता भएको व्यक्ति को प्रतिनिधित्व गर्छु र मेरो प्रश्न नेपाल सरकारको प्रतिनिधिलाई यो एक्सन प्लान बनाउँदै गर्दा अपाङ्गता भित्रमा पनि विशेष गरेर बहुपहिचान अनुसार प्रभाव पनि बहु हुने भएको हुनाले उनीहरूको त्यो सम्बोधन गर्नको लागि हामीलाई पनि छलफल प्रक्रियामा कसरी सहभागिता गराइयो र सहभागिता गराउने प्रक्रिया चाहिँ यहाँले अप्नाउनु भयो कि भएन